Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Holistic Conversations. Happy Saturday. Today we are going to talk about existentialism, a blessing in disguise. So this is a very vast topic. So we will see what all we can talk. I don't want to map it. I don't want to do any outlining. We'll just go with the flow. So today we have as our guest Jeff Rasley from Indiana. He was a guest with us before, and I'm really grateful that he has accepted to be with us today for this topic, to talk about this topic. He is an author, and he is the president of Basa Village Foundation, and he has written 17 books. Okay, that's what I read in his email. So we will listen to him in a bit. And then I have also my friend from India. We did our graduation, bachelor's together in the same university. But when I was talking to him now, before going live, I thought I don't know him at all. I mean, he has transformed, and he is going to talk how he has experienced me in this 10-15 minutes. So with this, I would like to invite my guest. I also wanted to talk a little bit, so I'll just bring them in and then I'll talk. Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Holistic Conversations. Thank you for being with us today. It is a very vast topic, so we will see what all we can do today. And also, this is a ever-ending, ongoing topic that we deal with it every moment, I can say, or every day, or every month, year, and so on. I totally feel like it's each breath we take. I would like to say, from my point of view, whatever I understand is, I would really like to talk about Adam and Eve. From them, we knew that we existed, and they only loved each other, and they had only one apple. From there, everything started, and then things kept going on, evolving, revolution, growth, prosperity, so many things, culture, civilization, agriculture, globalization. Oh my God, the list is never ending. I like this, so I wanted to share this. And also, I would like to read something from this book. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I was reading this and I was amazed where he shares the will to meaning. Man's search for meaning in the primary motivation in his life, and not a secondary rationalization of instinctual drives. This meaning is unique and specific in that it must and can be fulfilled by him alone. Only then does it achieve a significance which will satisfy his own will to meaning. There are some authors who contend that meanings and values are nothing but defense mechanisms, reaction formations, and sublimations. But as for myself, this 4 words, but as for myself, really touched me and really brought me to my responsibilities and purpose and meaning. I would continue to finish this sentence. But as for myself, I would not be willing to live merely by the sake of my defense mechanisms. Nor would I be ready to die merely for the sake of my reaction formations. Man, however, is able to live and even to die for the sake of his ideals and values. This is just so amazing. I think we come across the feeling of these words and the way he has narrated. It's something that we relate to every day, for a second or two, but we do relate, and then we again are detached. I also have something here to read from the same author, yes to life, saying yes to life. So he writes, whatever our future may hold, we still want to say yes to life, because one day the time will come, then we will be free. With this note, I would like to take a pause, and I would like to redirect to Sambit Mallick. He's going to start the conversation today. Before that, if anyone wants to say anything, we are open to it, or we can just dive into the conversation. Okay.
Can I start?
Okay. Sure.
Or is there anybody who wants?
You
Okay.
can start. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mamina. And thank you, Jeff, for joining this conversation. As I
Good to
told
be with
you,
you, Sambit and Amina.
okay. Just before starting this, we had an informal conversation, but I thought that actually it is already live. Okay. Now, what I was trying to narrate a story, not story as such, but the ways in which I tend to look at um different debates on existentialism. Existentialism not only as a theoretical construct, but also as a methodological device. What kind of ontological questions? The questions pertaining to being, questions pertaining to existing, what kind of epistemological foundations of existentialism, and what kind of praxeological concerns these praxeological concerns they emanate from uh, the philosophy of materialism and so on. As I said, I was, of course, in an informal way, I was talking to both Jeff and Amina that I have never done any kind of research on existentialism. But my reflections on existentialism are very much contingent upon the ways in which I tend to look at science studies in general and philosophy of science in particular. Because when I say science studies, I tend to look at philosophy of science, history of science, sociology of science, and so on. And that brings me to a discussion on 19th century idea of progress. That where I say I always say that uh, prior to the 19th century, philosophy, the way we look at it today in 2025, was divided into two parts. One, natural philosophy, and two, moral philosophy. Natural philosophy is nothing but science in the present sense of the term, and moral philosophy is nothing but ethics. Natural philosophy, I mean, the term science was coined by William Whewell in the 1830s. Prior to that, science was known as natural philosophy, studying nature, studying the laws of nature, and so on. Natural philosophers or scientists in the present sense of the term are engaged in epistemological questions, whereas moral philosophers or scholars of ethics are engaged in ethical questions. As we all know, epistemology is nothing but a body or theory of knowledge, precisely because of the philosophical questions that the proponents of epistemology or the proponents of natural philosophy they tend to address. These philosophical questions are these may appear to us very rudimentary, but they are very significant. Not simply intellectually, but also in our everyday life. These questions are: what is knowledge? What counts as knowledge? How is knowledge produced or generated? Perhaps the proponents of epistemology, the proponents of natural philosophy, they have historically ignored or neglected the question that the forms of knowledge that we have created, we have produced, whether they have been accessible to all or not, whether they are evenly distributed in our economic, culture, and polity or not. Questions of inclusion, questions of equity, questions of democracy, questions of accessibility, perhaps were missing in the purview, in the domain of natural philosophy or in the domain of science. And these questions were taken up by the scholars of ethics or moral philosophers. And as I always say that if I put natural philosophy or science or epistemology on a higher pedestal vis-a-vis moral philosophy or ethics, then perhaps it would be misleading. Separating the two, making some kind of a dichotomous line between epistemology and ethics would be misleading. And that's what branching them out, separating the two, was very much interrogated. The 19th century idea of progress was absolutely against such dichotomization. 19th century idea of progress, they tried to integrate the two, they tried to combine the two by integrating epistemology and ethics, or in other words, by integrating natural philosophy with moral philosophy. We tend to arrive at modern philosophy of science. Science, the way I tend to look at science, may be an inquiry. When I say science is an inquiry into the nature and limits of a particular knowledge. Science doesn't deal with all forms of knowledge. It always deals with particular forms of knowledge. When I say nature of scientific knowledge, everybody knows that subject matter of scientific knowledge, scope and ambit of scientific knowledge. But when I say limits of scientific knowledge, by limits I do not mean limitations. By limits, I mean under what limiting conditions science is practiced or pursued. That's why science is not universal. Science is very much relative to its context. That context may emanate from place, maybe historical narrative, maybe literature, maybe a poem. I mean, many sources. Science may also be a method. The famous Aristotelian question that what is the method of science elicited two rival responses from the 17th century to the 19th century, namely empiricism and rationalism, and even today we cannot just dismiss them, because we always say that experience and reason are the two sources through which we tend to produce knowledge. And the positivistic dominance or the romance with positivism by natural philosophers or scientists in the present sense of the term till the first half of the 20th century, what we tend to see that also had to be dismantled with the rise of nationalism in the third world, with the process of decolonization in the third world. India is no exception to this. And of course, more importantly, the second. The Second World War, in fact, changed the geopolitics, changed the intellectual narratives, changed the political narratives, development narratives, existential narratives or materialist narratives. Uh, the way Mannheimian position in ideology and utopia, the way Mannheim suggested that all knowledge except scientific knowledge is socially and culturally conditioned, which is popularly known as the internalist account of science, internalist characterization of science. I think, of course, Mannheim was working out his detailed sociology of science through theoretical and empirical investigations in a difficult time. I mean, he witnessed Nazi science, he witnessed Hitler. At the same time, he witnessed the Second World War and so on. He was writing during that time. He tried to place science on a higher pedestal in relation to non-sciences, whether it is art, literature, music, dance forms, anything, philosophy. Now, after the Second World War, we tried to work out a realist image of science, what science contributes to, whether science has contributed to wars, whether science has contributed to profits, whether science has contributed to colonial expansion. What kind of science do you want? Then, when Thomas Kuhn wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, then David Bloor wrote Knowledge and Social Imagery, they all said that no, science must be seen in terms of its historical integrity, science must be examined in terms of its historical integrity. All knowledge, including scientific knowledge, is socially caused. All knowledge, including scientific knowledge, is culturally embedded. And much before that, in 19th century itself, Marx said that what is science? Science is a social creation. I mean, the entire relations of production, the kind of relations of production that we tend to forge, that perhaps Marx tried to bring about. Of course, Marx was very much influenced by Darwin at that time, because Darwin actually is hailed as a Darwin's origin of species, Darwin's principle of natural selection. I mean, not principle of natural selection, but principle of natural selection, but not survival of the fittest. It is more Spencerian, actually. But origin of species, evolution of species, actually provided a paradigm for biological sciences. Much like the way paradigms were formed in astronomical sciences by Ptolemy initially, and then Copernicus and Galileo. And for example, in physical sciences, Newton provided a paradigm, and then Einstein provided another paradigm in physical sciences in the 20th century. If you look at these, for example, Freud provided a paradigm in the psychological sciences. Just like that, Marx is hailed as a provider of a paradigm in the humanities and social sciences. The distinction between Marx and Freud on the one hand, and whether it is Ptolemy or Copernicus, Galileo, Darwin, or Newton or Einstein on the other hand, is that the disciplines which mostly come under natural sciences, they have tried to build some kind of a consensus within their disciplines. Of course, these forms of consensus are manipulated, manufactured, no doubt about it. But in social sciences, in psychological sciences, it is not simply not possible to forge a consensus, but it is also not desirable to have a consensus. not having some kind of a desirability to forge a consensus perhaps strengthens our democratic ethos. And therein lies the significance of the debates that which took roots in the externalist characterization of science, that all knowledge, including scientific knowledge, is socially caused. What Bloor said, then actually Pierre Bourdieu, he delivered Huxley Memorial Lecture in December 2002. I think in a span of another 3-4 months, he passed away. He delivered a lecture. He delivered that lecture titled "Participant Objectivation," not participant observation, but participant objectivation. And posthumously, it was published in the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Institute. That when he said that science as a dynamic force must go beyond these dichotomies, that the internalist on the one hand and externalist on the other. Science as a dynamic force must go beyond the narrow confinements of the absolutist idealist conception of its own development on the one hand, and historical relativism of those who attempt to construe science as a purely conventional social construct on the other hand. I mean, both internalism and externalism, which were posed as dichotomies or binaries, I think they were questioned by Bourdieu. And the 21st century, the way we tend to look at science, perhaps we have lost sight of this historical conditioning of science. I think whether you look at Sartre's initial reflections on uh, existentialism, or the way he tried to borrow these borrow his reflections on existentialism from Husserl and Heidegger as a deliberate challenge to Marxism, a deliberate challenge to the materialist method. If you look at in Being and Nothingness or Materialism and Revolution, how Sartre presented his philosophy as an alternative to dialectical materialism. Then perhaps existentialism and materialism were posited as some kind of binaries, which is actually not correct. Then in the late 50s, the way Sartre made a turnabout and embraced Marxism, at least in words, which for him, as he explains in the first volume of his autobiography, if you look at that, even that latest philosophical treaty, is the name that the critique of dialectical reason, that search for a method, that he declares existentialism, which has become a subordinate branch of Marxism, which aspires to renew and enrich it. Thus, the phenomenologist of existence, who condemned dialectical materialism as false and as inimical to freedom, human freedom in the 1940s, now proposes to marry uh, uh, both Marxism as well as existentialism. And perhaps my job here is to go beyond the naivety of such dichotomizing tendencies within philosophy of science, and to look at to what extent and in what ways, if any, can these philosophies be conjoined? Can a synthesis of the two be viable? And let us see. Maybe I'll stop here for some time. Then we'll have some more discussion from Jeff, and then I'll take up. Yeah. Thank you. Is it okay?
Well, let me respond. I think Sambit gave us a very excellent historical and epistemological background, which leads up to, in philosophy, which leads up to existentialism. I'd like to approach it in maybe a more sort of down-to-earth, pragmatic way. Going back to Viktor Frankl, who I find very moving, and I've quoted him extensively in one of my books called 72 Wisdoms, and Frankl being one of the 72 wise people that I devoted a chapter to. And what Frankl has to offer about existentialism comes from his experience of being in a concentration camp. He was Jewish. The Nazis incarcerated him and his family in a concentration camp. Most of his family died. Frankl survived, came to the United States, and became an eminent philosopher and popular writer. And what he has to say about existentialism in a very pointed, poignant way is that essentially human beings are free, and free in the sense of their consciousness. He was completely unfree in the concentration camp. But what he maintained is that the Nazis and the guards could not control his consciousness. And so he was free to leave the concentration camp in his mind, to fantasize, to imagine, to live a life outside of his bondage. And what's important about that is that where that took Frankl is to, in terms of a sort of a philosophical, pragmatic position, is that every moment in our life, we are free to make decisions about what our existence means. And what he was especially concerned about was trying to figure out how do you live a meaningful existence. And of course, in every human individual context, that has variables, but in sort of a generalized way, what it means is that each moment we can choose to be someone who is contributing something positive. We can do something that is contributing something positive. And so to kind of retreat to a more sort of abstract academic level, is the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, in a way, is the most important universal reality that there is. And, and that is that everything is leading to a state of chaos. And so the only way that this tendency towards disorder in the universe is for some force to resist that, to put something positive rather than to put something ordered or positive into this world, as opposed to the tendency towards disorder. And so, again, in just bringing it down to kind of a more pragmatic level, is that means that each of us, every moment of our lives, we can choose to just sort of give in to this universal tendency to disorder, or we can try to be a force of synergy, to take what the circumstances of our lives have given us and to try to give something to the world that makes it better, um, more ordered, not ordered in the sense of authoritarian tyranny, but ordered in a way that makes not only our individual lives better, but the lives of those who we touch better. And so, we could talk about specific examples. One of the ways that I have tried to do that, to be a force for positivity, that Mamina mentioned in the introduction, is through the foundation called the Bassa Village Foundation. I'm the president of another foundation called the Scientech Foundation of Indiana. Um, and that foundation is devoted to finding educational programs in my home state, Indiana, which are underfunded for what we would call less privileged children, and to fund programs that are based on STEAM education, science, technology, engineering, arts, and medicine, which can lead those kids into productive careers and take them out of poverty. And then the other foundation, the Bassa Village Foundation, is focused on a very remote area in Nepal called Bassa, where the foundation has worked with the local people to develop infrastructure. When I first went to Bassa in 2008, there was no running water, no electricity. There was a school which had 3 grades only. Uh, and since then, through the funding of the foundation and the uh, hard work of the local people, we've added 2 grades to the school. We've developed a water system, an electrical system. The school has computers, a full library. There's now a medical clinic and a road that comes to the village. And so the basic infrastructure for just living sort of by our, 21st century standards, a a decent life. And the project we're currently working on is to develop a sustainable commercial enterprise so that the villagers are not completely dependent on the weather, because if the crops don't come in, then people starve. And so we've developed the beginning of an animal husbandry co-op of raising pigs and goats, and also we're paying the salary for an English teacher, so the kids will also be able to take their language skills, and if they choose to, leave the village and find jobs in so many of the enterprises in Nepal that require mastery of English. But anyway, so that's kind of my own story of how I've tried to take that lesson from Viktor Frankl and become a force for positivity, and which has given me, in my own feeling, a more meaningful life. So back to you, Amina and Sambit.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff. I mean, uh, I truly appreciate this kind of effort, which also tries to make a deep connect with the masses, the people. When you said, universal tendency, disorder, safe drinking water, electricity. Uh, if I mean, these are the whenever I look at politics and sociology of development and so on, economics of development. Uh, People always talk about scarcity, how we must use electricity to such an extent that non-renewable sources of energy to such an extent that so that we can keep something for our future generations and so on. All sustainable development narratives. But what I always feel that I think this concept of scarcity, uh, I think it must be examined within the matrix of a class divided society. Uh, it must be examined uh, within not only within the matrix of a class divided society, but also uh, uh, within the purview of the location of various contending social forces. Uh, uh, Also, the relationship of the state, the the way I tend to look at the relationship of the state with various other contending social forces. I mean, scarcity uh, perhaps has become some kind of an invention uh, to protect the rich in Indian context. That that those who have access to better access to, or more access to safe drinking water. I was in Lund University in Sweden for a month or so under the Linus Palme Exchange Program in 2017. There I was asked to teach critical geographies of power. There I had to collect some data. What I saw that, for example, in India, you will find that 78% of the population of India, they do not have the capacity to earn $1 a day. We have more mobile phone users as compared to our access to safe drinking water. I think these are very important things that that Jeff has pointed out. Truly appreciate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that if anyone studies how our how our classes and of course India has the history of the caste system, and here in the United States we like to think of ourselves as having a caste-less no caste system, but of course we know in reality there are very clear demarcations between the super wealthy, the wealthy, the middle class, the lower working class, and then what Marx would call the lumpen proletariat. Um, and that there are structures that help to maintain that system, even though they may not have sort of the cultural and historical roots like the caste system in India. But being a lawyer, I can see how the legal system is one way, one force that maintains the privileges of the wealthy and subjects those without wealth to to conditions that are most likely to uh, have them lead lives that remain not wealthy. I mean, in just a very sort of simple way that that plays out is that in the criminal system, if you're really poor, you can get a public defender if you've been charged with a crime. But the reality is the public defenders are overworked and underpaid. So the lawyer you're getting is certainly not someone who's going to give you the best possible defense. If you're middle class, you can hire a private lawyer, but they're very expensive. And middle class people really can't afford to pay a lawyer for any kind of extensive litigation. You know, you can afford to pay a lawyer for simple things like uncontested divorces, simple wills, that sort of things. That's within your economic power. But beyond that, you're actually worse off in some ways than the poor person who could get a public defender or on the civil side, a legal services, legal aid attorney. And then, of course, the wealthy can afford to spend as much money as they want to and hire the best lawyers in the country. And so, you know, and this plays out in all sorts of different ways. I mean, you know, within education, there's been since the 60s in the US a great effort to open up higher education to anyone, no matter your financial circumstances. But that is somewhat being challenged now, particularly and very specifically by the Trump administration, because the student loan debt has become, in a way, almost a national embarrassment that poor kids have taken on so much debt to acquire the education that is there for them to acquire if they can afford it, but they spend the rest of their lives paying off that debt. And in that sort of, you know, economic bondage, they really can't live out their lives to its fullest potential. And, you know, I could go on and on. The Of course, if you have power and money, you want to hang on to it. And the tendency of the human mind is to see what you have as something that has to be protected from others. And so the, you know, the privileged classes create ways to maintain their wealth and power, and some are subtle and some are overt, just like the ones I described. Um, but again, if we go back to Frankl and that sort of pragmatic approach to existentialism, then regardless of where you are, whether you're poor, middle class, wealthy, each moment of your life, you know, you have the power, the freedom to make a decision as to what you're going to contribute or what you're going to simply protect and hold on to. And, you know, I've encountered many very philanthropic and generous people of wealth. And, you know, you're not going to change the fundamental structure by being a generous philanthropic person. But what you can do is you can at least lift up and offer opportunities by sharing your wealth and your knowledge with those who, you know, haven't had the privileges that you have. And the same at the other economic and class end of the spectrum. If you come from less privileged, poor background, you too have the decision and freedom to decide, am I going to enter into a life of crime to try to take what I feel I should get with a gun? Or are you going to work hard and within the means that you have to advantage yourself so that you can then give back to your community.
Yeah, that's very important. Truly important. I mean, if you look at, for example, Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, which is Gandhi's Hind Swaraj. What he said, I mean, Gandhi is often more misunderstood than understood, at least in Indian context, what I have noticed. Gandhi was beyond his times, in fact. What he said in Hind Swaraj, he said, if India copies England, it is my firm conviction that she will be ruined. Then we must build our own infrastructure, maybe small scale, but we must have our own infrastructure so that we'll not have to depend on the Manchester cotton industry for all time to come. It was a part of anti-colonial struggle that Gandhi had to wage. That perhaps he was also trying to look at capitalism in a different way, not like 19th century idea of progress. For example, Amartya Sen. If we look at his works, then we'll find that
Yes.
he's also yes. Am I
Uh,
audible?
yes, you are audible, but I would like you to brief a little bit about Amartya Sen when you're talking about him. Just a little
Yeah,
bit. Just
yeah.
a little background so that we all know. Yeah.
Okay. Amartya Sen, he won Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in perhaps in 98 or yeah, 1998. Um, he, in fact, was the first within economic sciences who said that we need not have only goal-oriented social action, as Weber pointed out long back, maybe more than 100 years back, that Weber provided 4 types of social action: traditional social action, affective or emotive social action, value rational social action, goal rational social action, and he attributed greatest emphasis on goal-oriented social action, alternatively known as instrumental rationality. And then what he did, he said, fine, if we have, for example, we must place higher emphasis on instrumental rationality or goal-oriented social action. He gave an interesting example. He said, for example, we have running sort of agricultural production. For example, rice production. We have less amount of rice. Our goal is to increase rice production in India. And that's what we did in the 1960s when we adopted high-yielding varieties of seeds, especially Green Revolution. And in the late 1980s and early 1990s, we adopted genetic manipulation of plants through Monsanto and Maharashtra Hybrid Seed Company, popularly known as Mahiko. And then he said that yes, we have achieved our goal in increasing the agricultural yield, but we have utterly failed to critically embed values in our goals. Now, what is the value system then? Now, our value is to ensure that there should not be any hunger, death, there should not be any poverty, squalor, diseases. I think if values are not included in our objectives, in our goals, and that's what Sen contributed to the world of economic sciences in capitalist mode of production. I think capitalism, for a pretty long period of time, has not yet been able to include values in the objectives, and Sen's contributions, methodologically speaking, is extremely important when he said that values must be critically embedded in our objectives or goals or aims. And that's how he contributed immensely to the world of famines, poverty, unemployment, and not only in economic sciences, but also in philosophy. I mean, the idea of justice, the argumentative Indian, I mean, whatnot. And the way we tend to look at the rise of, the rise of modernity uh, in thinking in 17th century, uh, I think it also drastically altered the hitherto existing conception uh, about the conception of the binaries or dichotomies between science and non-science, science and technology, uh, and so on. Science, which as an within the purview of existential philosophy, what I feel that science also began to be posited, situated as an act of knowing, and technology as an act of doing. I think that is becoming obsolete today, because we also say in science studies that technology predates modern science. Okay. And such dichotomous formulation was very much questioned by uh, several scholars in the 19th century and then 20th century, especially after the Second World War. And modernity as an ideology, as a modernity as a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution as well as French Revolution, of course, they are very important, because they not only provided, I mean, Industrial Revolution provided us with the ideas of not simply changes in the modes of production, but also uh, critical thinking, rationality, rise of modern science, and French Revolution provided us with the ideas of justice, liberty, freedom, equality, and so on. In this sense, modernity as an ideology has guided much of our scientific enterprise and its theorization. Modernity, both as theory and practice, is organically linked to the idea of controlling nature and mastering it. Okay. Modernity in the age of capitalism. Okay. And many perceptive thinkers, even today, they try to link this idea of controlling over nature to the central political phenomena of the contemporary period, namely institutionalized controls of some over others, some within quote. And these some are not usually uh, men of property in the traditional sense, but men of expert knowledge. And scientific knowledge and its associated proprietary technologies have become the source of power over nature. Nevertheless, in reality, power over nature gets translated into power over people. And it is this domination of expert knowledge and its nexus with political power that makes a mockery of liberty in any substantial sense. And in this, and under such circumstances, I think Gandhi and Sen, they're extremely important to make sense of, especially Sen today. Sen, in fact, I'm sure all of you know Michael Burrow, who recently passed away in February. He was a professor of sociology at the University of California, Berkeley. A fantastic social scientist of our generation. Uh, that's where I'm getting this, borrowing this term, that disenchantment, that Weberian term, that disenchantment. But he didn't say disenchantment within science as a vocation. Rather, I'm trying to borrow that term disenchantment as a methodological tool to situate disenchantment with demarcation between science and non-sciences, uh, autonomy of science, cognitive authority of science, which has led most of us uh, to delve into the examination of science in its historical integrity and cultural embeddedness. Nations, structures, and systems of modern material culture must be examined not simply on the basis of their efficiency and productivity and positive and negative environmental side effects, but also on the ways in which they embody power and authority. To buttress the argument, what matters is not technology itself, but the economic and social system in which it is embedded. Towards the end of the 20th century and early 21st century, I think 2005, 6 or 7, uh, um, what as I told you, what Sen was trying to combine instrumental rationality with value rationality. Sen expressed doubts about the separation of instrumental from value rationality. What he said in the idea of justice, he said that prejudices, biases, blind beliefs, stereotypes, myths, superstitions, they typically ride on the back of some kind of reasoning, weak or arbitrary, though it might. Indeed, even every dogmatic person tend to have some kinds of reasoning, possibly very crude ones, in support of their dogma. Unreason is mostly not the practice of doing without reasoning altogether, but of relying on very primitive and very defective reasoning. All knowledge, that's why I always say that all knowledge is conditional, subject to religion, whether existentialism or constructivism or Marxism um, or functionalism or whatever somebody says. I think all knowledge is conditional. It is relative to its context and is subject to religion. Yeah. Thank you.
I think we're about out of time, so I'm going to just leave this with a thought, and then I need to sign off because we're having a party to celebrate our Indy 500, the great motor race. Anyway, consider this. Happiness quotient surveys consistently show that the happiest people live in the Scandinavian countries, that the Scandinavian model of a highly regulated by government economic system of capitalism has produced, at this point in the history of humankind, the best system. Not perfect, not the final one, but the best as of now. And that is because it takes the values that Sambit was talking about, and we can go back to Gandhi's Satyagraha, King's Truth Horse, and see that government can impose values on a political economic system without losing the dynamism and the productivity of capitalism. And with that, I do really need to sign off. It's been great meeting you, Sambit, and again, being with you, Mamina.
Same here. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your insight. And yeah, it's
We'll be
it's
in
a
touch.
lesson for every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can I leave?
We will all leave. We will all
Yeah.
leave. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to conclude that it was very insightful. And all we need is the synthesis of what we are learning. We are just getting divided more and more. We are just getting divided more and more. And we can still hope for uniting our knowledge with values.
Well said.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you, Sambit. Thank you. Thank you.